Mr. President, I rise on a point of personal and collective privilege. I rise as Senate Chair of the Committee on Women, as a senator, but most importantly as a woman. Last Thursday, during the committee hearing for the budget of the Commission on Human Rights, I was jolted by news of the passing of Miriam Defensor Santiago. Senator Miriam was many things to many people. To those with whom she crossed swords, they would likely remember her sharp, unrelenting tongue. To her family and close friends, she was a loving wife and mother. To the millennials of this country, her biting wit and pickup lines are the stuff legends are made of. To her supporters from various generations, she was, and I quote, the best president we never had, close quote. To me, Mr. President, I choose to remember her as an ally and fellow traveler in our long struggle for reproductive health. In her, I saw the tenacity required to shepherd important and historic legislation to fruition. And with her, as well as the legions of women advocates, I saw the importance of the women's voice in pushing policy. Because love her or hate her, one thing is certain. Miriam Defensor Santiago was a woman who made sure her voice was heard. She paved the way for women like me who believed that there was a glass ceiling that needed to be broken, an old boys club that needed to be penetrated, because this club sought to make decisions about our bodies, our health, our lives, and our futures without our consent. In this club, women are either outsiders who must request to get in, objects of spectacle whose existence and agency are defined according to the men in their lives, or recipients of tokenist favors. Buhay na buhay pa din, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, ang Old Boys Club sa gobyerno. This Old Boys Club phenomenon is alive and kicking. At its most benign, it can manifest itself in statements like, "Of course, I will yield to the beautiful senator." Then it can progress to catcalling and rape jokes. Sa bagay, Mr. President, hindi lang ito sa Pilipinas. In America, their male presidential candidate just called a woman Miss Piggy. At its worst and ugliest, this Old Boys Club in the Philippines seeks to shame a woman senator into silence by threatening the release of a video purported to capture her in a sexual act. Now, the Justice Secretary says, quote, "We are not going to present anything about the sex video. We are not in possession of any video," close quote. Mr. President, we have yet to hear from the House of Representatives if they indeed will cease and desist from this threatened assault on a fellow legislator. The victory will be of the netizens, women writers, women representatives, and women senators who said enough. Whether you think the video is fake or not is of no moment. What you think of the drug-related allegations leveled against her is of no moment. Isang usapin lang po ang inilalatag ko sa inyong harapan ngayon, Mr. President. Will we allow the House of Representatives to show the sex video allegedly showing Senator Laila de Lima? In the first place, the release of the video would be illegal. It would be in violation of Republic Act 9995 or the Anti-Photo or Video Voyeurism Act of 2009, which requires the consent of the person or persons in the video before its release or distribution. The House Speakership and its Committee on Justice would be party to the commission of a crime under RA 9995. It would be, for all intents and purposes, a sex crime. Do we allow our colleagues in the House to be party to a sex crime? Do we allow a fellow senator to be the victim of a sex crime? But, Mr. President, The legality or illegality of it is not the core issue that I want to get to. It is the systemic and structural machismo that pervades our political culture. The double standards that are so ingrained in our life that they become invisible tools of oppression. Sa pag-iit ng opinyon, pag lalaki, assertive and decisive. Sinasabi ng lipunan, take a bow. Pag babae, hysterical and shrill. Sinasabi ng lipunan, take a break. Sa pag-abante ng career, pag lalaki, go-getter. Pag babae, bad mother. Kaya naman, pag ang lalaki may sex video, macho, matinik. Pag babae, malaswa, malandi. Mr. President, we could still be about to cross the Rubicon if we stand by in silence while our colleagues in the House perpetrate this indignity against a fellow senator. We would have chosen vulgarity over civility, misogyny over basic respect and decency. We would be telling our daughters that they can be shamed for their sexuality in ways that their brothers or future husbands or partners will never be. We would be telling our little girls that their sexual choices are fair game and that their bodies can be policed. Sinong susunod? Sinong susunod na gagawa ng peking sex video? Sinong susunod na hihiyain sa madla? Ako, si Senator Nancy, si Senator Grace, si Senator Cynthia, o si Senator Loren? O ang babaeng iniwan ang nambubugbog na partner at bilang ganti ay in-upload ang sex video nila? Kasi pwede na. Sabi ng Kongreso, pwede. Mr. President, Senator Laila has her political battles, and many of you might disagree with her positions. So be it. But on the singular issue of the sex video, the battle is bigger than Senator Laila. It is about respect and decency between institutions. It is about chipping away at the structural misogyny that pervades our culture. Most of all, it is about raising little girls who believe that they can define themselves with no fear of shame, and who believe that their bodies and their lives are theirs and theirs alone. This is not just about Senator Laila. This is about every woman. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hontiveros. With the permission of the body, a minute suspension. Last majority. May mag-interplate yata si Bak. Ha? Ikaw din? Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, to interpolate the distinguished lady from Akbayan, I would like to recognize Senator Bam Aquino.
Senator Aquino is recognized.
Mr. President, magandang hapon. Will the lady from Akbayan yield to a few questions?
Gladly, Mr. President.
First of all, Mr. President, I'm quite pleased with the speech of Senator Hontiveros. A number of us had voiced our concern and our objection to the playing of that supposed sex video in Congress. Let me begin by asking about the hashtag. The hashtag is every woman. Maybe you can elucidate, Senator Hontiveros, bakit every woman po yung naging hashtag na ginagamit sa issue na ito?
Mr. President, yung hashtag na yon, yung naging isang battle cry o battle axe nung mga netizens na on a certain day last week, kumbaga napuno na ang salok nila. Sabi talaga nila, sobra na. Tama na, tigilin na ito. And they came up, at first it was women on the net, but men, like the good senator, joined in, adding hashtag everyman, and then various other netizens joined in with an additional hashtag everyhuman. So na ang mensahe po niyan, Mr. President, is also what I just expressed, that this issue of an alleged sex video is not only about a single senator or single legislator. It's at its very core a human issue, a human dignity, a human rights issue. It has to do with the dignity of every woman. Women who are trying to speak the truth of our own lives, women who, in various aspects of our lives, are seeking justice for the issues that are important to us. So, hindi ino-own ng isang individual lang yung ganitong advocacy against sexism and against misogyny. It is an eminently human struggle.
Hence, the usage of the word every.
Every.
So lahat po pwedeng mabiktima ng gantong karahasan. It is a form of violence.
It is really a form of violence, even under the Women in Nation Building Act and other national laws and international instruments that the Philippines has either passed in Congress or is party to in the Community of Nations, Mr. President.
And Mr. President, ito pong paggamit ng sex video or sexual information para mang-oppress ng iba o para mag-revenge, hindi naman ho ito unique sa sitwasyon natin. This is actually done in many societies, even in the Philippines, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President. Indeed, this kind of assault from the platform of sexism and misogyny is not unique to the Philippines, not unique to this particular situation, so much so that the Philippine Congress saw it fit to pass various laws to protect women or all persons from such psychological violence. I mentioned, for example, Republic Act 9995, the Anti-Photo or Video Voyeurism Act. There are also various provisions, articles under the revised penal code. There is, as I mentioned, the Magna Carta of Women. There are city ordinances in different parts of the country which would categorize such an act or such the threat of an act as psychological violence and a violation of the rights of women.
Mr. President, it's not unique to Philippine society, but it seems that this type of action or violence or oppression seems to be unique to women. Parang hindi po ako nakakita ng galit po sa lalaki na gagamitin ang gantong klaseng karahasan. Is that right, Madam Senator?
Unfortunately, Mr. President, as in all cases of violence against women that are classified under different Philippine laws, unfortunately, in all of these cases of violence, women are indeed the majority of the victims. We are the overwhelming majority of victims of these kinds of violations.
Why is that, Mr. President? Bakit po sa babae po nakafocus ang gantong klaseng karahasan?
Mr. President, sa babae po nakafocus ang ganitong klaseng karahasan precisely because of the sexist and misogynistic character still in year 2016 of Philippine society. We have a culture, despite many advances born out of the struggles of the women's movements, including some support from some fellow men at different stages of history, still overwhelmingly the privileging of the male sex, the privileging of male characteristics of human beings as demonstrated whether through reproductive functions or through differences in social and cultural behaviors. If there is that kind of built-in inequality in our society, as expressed in our culture. And as this culture comes out in the different institutions of our society, even of our government, then it is no surprise, though it is a terrible surprise, that still there is a high incidence of violence against women, various forms of violence against women, and as the title would suggest, the majority of victims of these kinds of violence would be women.
Mr. President, Madam Senator, ito pong currently, today, if the headlines are correct, it seems Congress is not pushing through anymore with showing of that alleged sex video. A number of groups came out, individuals, cross-party, lumabas po to state their objection to this act. I'm sure a lot of the women's groups were elated or were quite happy that this happened.
Mr. President, as far as I know, we have heard from the Justice Secretary that now he says they are not in possession of such a video. Now he says they are not going to screen any such video. But as I mentioned in my speech, we have yet to hear from the House of Representatives whether they will in fact cease and desist from their earlier expressed intention to show such a video.
All right, and Senator Hontiveros, the lady senators have actually filed a resolution on this issue. Maybe you could elucidate further, Mr. President. We can ask Senator Hontiveros to tell us more about this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. The resolution, which was just read on the floor by the good majority leader, was signed by all the rest of the 5 of us women senators in our chamber. It notes that our sister Senator Laila de Lima is the subject of an ongoing investigation in the House, that there has been a push on the part of some representatives to show that alleged sex video. We noted in our resolution that showing such a video would be in violation of the Anti-Photo or Video Voyeurism Act, that further it would violate a long-standing and cherished tradition of extending interparliamentary courtesy across the line of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And most importantly, we said in our resolution that such an act would undermine our lifelong torturous struggle to uphold and uplift the dignity of women. And so we called upon our good chamber to express the sense of the Senate that we strongly oppose and condemn such an act contemplated by our fellow legislators in the House.
Mr. President, I commend, of course, the lady senators for taking the lead on this resolution, and I will be very supportive of this resolution when the time comes. Mr. President, that's all of my questions for Senator Hontiveros. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po, Mr. Senator. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President.
What's the pleasure of Senator Drilon?
If the lady will yield to a few questions.
Okay. So Senator Drilon is recognized for interpellation.
Will the lady from Capiz yield to a few questions?
Gladly, Mr. President.
Mr. President, this is my 19th year in the Senate, and this is the first time that our Congress is confronted with the situation just described on the record by Senator Hontiveros. We all know that under our Constitution, investigations in Congress are done in aid of legislation. And therefore, witnesses appear not as an accused, but as resource persons in order to clarify certain issues and in order to aid the legislators in crafting laws for the common good, for the good of our country, and for purposes of finding out how else we can amend certain laws that are in the books. That is why we have resource persons. Now, in this particular case, may I know if the lady, if Senator Hontiveros is aware of the legislation ought to be enacted by showing this alleged sex video?
Mr. President, in fact, I do not know of any apparent or even expressed subject in terms of a law that is supposed to be examined for oversight of its implementation in the threatened showing of this alleged video in the course of the House investigation of our colleague, Mr. President.
And if I recall correctly, our colleague from Capiz was in the House of Representatives for 9 years before coming here in the Senate.
For 6 years, Mr. President.
For 6 years. Was there any instance when you were in the House, Mr. President, that you were confronted with a situation where the Justice Secretary and the Chair of the Committee on Justice and the Speaker of the House in unison says, we will show this video?
Never, Mr. President. Never also have I seen a secretary conduct hearings in the House of Representatives. So there was, in a way, a shock upon shock in observing the goings-on now around this alleged sex video.
So that you absolutely see no relation whatsoever between any pretended legislation and this purported sex video to be necessary in order to come up with any legislation that is supposed to be enacted.
The only expressed intent I've heard, Mr. President, for the investigation as a whole is to look into certain allegations regarding activities within the New Bilibid prisons, but nothing that I can understand as a fellow legislator that would be impacted by the showing of an alleged sex video.
So what in the view of Mr. President, of our colleague, is the purpose of showing this video?
If I would be so bold as to guess, Mr. President, I'm afraid that the only purpose of threatening to show an alleged sex video, which the supposed subject has already said is not her, and which persons who have watched the video said is not her, is to shame and humiliate, and in fact, over the past few months, batter her into silence in violation of her duties as a fellow legislator, of the legislators who were publicly speaking about this intention. Not at all, Mr. President, in aid of legislation, and certainly I don't think in the highest traditions of the Congress of our Republic, whether the House of Representatives or the Senate.
What do you think should the Senate do under these circumstances, given the fact that our colleague is being subjected to this kind of pressure, harassment that you have just mentioned, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, we 5 other women members of this chamber already took a step together yesterday, as I saw it, crossing party lines, putting front and center our sisterhood and solidarity as women and as senators to appeal to the Senate, to express the sense of the Senate that on the grounds I mentioned earlier, we oppose and we would strongly condemn any move by the House of Representatives to show such an alleged sex video.
Just a parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President, where was the resolution referred to, if it was?
Committee on Rules just today, Mr. Senator Dillon.
Mr. President, may I? Yes, I will concur with the answer of the Senate President. It was referred to the Committee on Rules. As a matter of fact, for the information of everyone, before Senator Hontiveros stood up to rise on a point of personal privilege or of public interest, I approached the Senate President and discussed with the Senate President the possibility of reporting out the committee or the resolution now. We just were waiting for her to finish with her privilege speech, Mr. President.
In view of that manifestation, we now terminate our interpellation, given the fact that the Majority Leader, as Chairman of the Committee on Rules, manifested that they're going to come out with a ruling on this resolution, and we can just raise questions, if any, when that appropriate, when the majority leader would sponsor that resolution on the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Salamat gid to my fellow Ilonggo Senator. Thank you so much, Mr. Majority Leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader, can I suspend and ask the Senator Drilon to preside, because I want to also interpolate the good senator. So, with the
Yes.
permission of the body, let's a minute suspension.
We're ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
May we recognize the Senate President, Senator Aquilino Pimentel III, Mr. President.
The Senate President is recognized for the period of interpellation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Will the good lady senator yield to a few questions?
Certainly, Mr. President.
Thank you. The subject matter of your speech, Madam Senator, is PS Resolution number 184, which was just referred to the Committee on Rules this afternoon. So I'm sure a lot of us have not had the chance to read the body of the resolution. You cite 3 reasons why the Senate should express its sense that the alleged sex video should not be shown. So one is, it is illegal. Number 2, violative of interparliamentary courtesy and decency, and an affront to women's dignity.
Yes, Mr. President.
I have here Republic Act number 9995, and in your speech you cited, what section did you cite?
I refer especially, Mr. President, to Section 4, letter D of Republic Act number 9995, entitled Prohibited Acts.
Yes. But I'd like to bring our attention to Section 7 also of the same law, making the recording or the video recording inadmissible as evidence, even in a legislative hearing or investigation. So I think that should be an additional ground to argue for the illegality of the contemplated act of Congress. I just want
Thank
to
you,
be,
Mr. President. Will do.
but I want to be educated more on why it would be violative of interparliamentary courtesy.
Thank you, Mr. President. It would be violative of interparliamentary courtesy because, as I learned when I was working in the House of Representatives, and as I continue to learn here now in the Senate, there is that institutional courtesy across the divide between the House of Representatives and the Senate among fellow legislators, all of whom are supposed to be working in harmony or in principal disagreement with each other in order to craft a policy framework for our country. A policy framework that will advance various goods, including human dignity, human equality, and gender equality. Therefore, such an act, which is so obviously springing from sexism and misogyny, which would undermine our efforts to uplift the dignity of women and the equality among women and men of different sexual orientations and gender identities, would set it back. It would be an action totally opposed to the spirit of, in fact, the values enshrined in our Constitution, Mr. President.
When, during the earlier interpellation, you discussed the lack of subject matter in aid of legislation of the House committee conducting the investigation, did we also not violate interparliamentary courtesy?
Well, if I did, Mr.
When we are now questioning now the motive of a fellow legislative of a committee of the other chamber of the Congress.
If I have done so, Mr. President, I am willing to stand corrected. And even as I stand corrected, I will still fight for a recognition on the part of our colleagues in the House of Representatives of the courtesy they owe to not just our colleague, but their colleague in the Congress of the Republic.
So I think the better attitude is for us to accept the declaration of a committee of the House that their investigation is in aid of legislation, out of courtesy.
Mr. President, I would be willing to do that if they could indeed point out that the conduct of their investigation, not the investigation per se, but this conduct of threatening to show an alleged video is in aid of legislation, except also for the fact, Mr. President, and may I thank the good Senator Pangilinan for reminding me, Rule 34 of our rules entitled Unparliamentary Acts and Language under Section 93 provides, and I quote, "Acts and language which offend the senator or any public institution shall be deemed unparliamentary." So perhaps we would still be within our rights as a Senate, as one of the houses of the Congress of the Republic, to remind the House of Representatives not to engage in such acts and language offensive to a senator or any public institution, Mr. President.
Actually, I believe that there is no video. There is no actual video. Some have shown me a video, but it does not involve any member of the Senate. It is a video. It is a sex video, but it does not involve any member of the Senate. So there is no video. And during their last hearing, before their last hearing, they also hyped the showing of a video. And what did they show? They showed the Gangs of the World video. It's correct that they showed a video, but it was about this documentary on the gangs of the world. At any rate, Mr. President, Madam Senator, I think it's also in our rules that the Committee on Rules can immediately act on your proposed Senate resolution, because I am in favor of expressing the sense of the Senate that showing that alleged sex video is illegal. I am for the legality. But just for the information of everyone, the Speaker has categorically stated to me that no such video will be shown in the hearing, I think on Thursday. So even though the answer makes the resolution moot and academic, I will leave it up to the body if we want to pass the resolution to guide future actions, future issues concerning this alleged sex video. But my personal belief is that there is no such video.
Mr. President, if indeed there is no such video, if indeed, as the Justice Secretary just this afternoon said, we are not in possession of any such video, we will not show any such video, well and good. But 2 points, Mr. President. I'm glad that in a way the Senate President has been prophetic in his recent statements, because the Senate President himself said previously that there would be a political price to pay if the video is shown, which I was proud to associate myself with as a member of the Senate under the Senate President. Secondly, Mr. President, I have 3 points on this, Mr. President. Secondly, the mere threat of showing such an alleged sex video in order, out of sexism and misogyny, to silence a fellow legislator is already inherently unparliamentary. And for me, as a humble member of this chamber, deserves a word from us to the other house. And last but not the least, Mr. President, because of this, and I thank, salamat kaayo to Senate President for associating himself with the issue of legality that we women senators raised in our resolution. Therefore, such a resolution and such an issue can never be moot and academic. Every time sexism or misogyny raises its head against any woman or any girl, whether in our families and homes, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our institutions, and we too, the Senate, are a workplace, and of course, one of the most prestigious institutions of our land. We have to call it for what it is. And we have to tell off those who speak from a position of power and abuse it, not to undermine sexism and misogyny, but to further ingrain it in our society and our culture, and make it that much more difficult for women and girls, and for men and boys who are trying to liberate our society from this terrible aspect of our society, that much more difficult. Thank you, Mr. President.
And as the president of PDP Laban, I made it a party directive to the party mates in the House. Should it be put to a vote, they should vote against the showing of the video.
Daghang salamat, Senate President.
So I think this is there will be no showing of any video on Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. President.
But I thank you for also introducing this concept of interparliamentary courtesy, because this is not a fixed concept. So I would just like to take this opportunity to encourage everyone to read up on this subject matter so we can understand better what is this concept of interparliamentary courtesy and when it is properly invoked. So thank you very much.
I will do so,
all the best. Thank you,
also, Mr. President. One last addition, Mr. President, just the threat of violence is damaging just as the actual violence is. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. President, may we recognize Senator J.V. Ejercito.
Mr. President, Your Honor,
Senator Ejercito is recognized.
yes, Your Honor, allow me to commend our lady senators today for standing up for what I also believe is an affront to women's rights and dignity. May I just make a manifestation? I won't interpolate. May I briefly manifest that I'm fully against the showing of an alleged sex video of our colleague, Senator Laila de Lima, the ongoing investigation in Congress. As I said earlier, it is in violation of the Anti-Photo and Video Voyeurism Act of 2009. But more than the violation of this law, interparliamentary courtesies and fairness dictate that we respect the rights and dignity of our fellow men, especially women, even if they have been proven guilty. Senator de Lima's guilt has yet to be proven in the said investigation. I urge our colleagues in Congress to heed our call for interparliamentary courtesy and be respectful at all times in our quest for truth and justice. Let this august body remain the stalwarts of decency, reason, empathy, compassion, and everything that we have sworn to do and protect to make humanity thrive. We are waging a war against drugs and criminality, not against our women, and especially not against our very own humanity. After all, we are men. Thank you, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay kayo, Mr. President.
Senator Subiri, with the permission of Senator Subiri.
If it's all right with the majority floor leader. Yeah, Mr. President, as a matter of fact, we'd like to put on record that last night we were together with Senator Sherwin, Senator Joel, Senator Sani, and Senator JV. We were going to come up with an open letter to the House of Representatives appealing to them, being former members of the House, and to show interparliamentary courtesy, at the same time for appealing to their decency and civility for all women of the world. That we all have children, and I have a daughter, and that we don't want this to show that we are condoning such acts of uncivilized behavior. And unfortunately today, fortunately the speaker had come out and saying that they were not going to anymore show the video, so we were not able to get together and sign the letter. But to show solidarity with our women legislators, we were already planning it last night to show support to this, to our chamber and to the women of the Philippines and the women of the world, that we still will fight for dignity and civility, Mr. President. Being also former members, you know, the tables can be turned. And if the tables are turned, we also should show our dignity and civility as a chamber to our fellow members of an equal chamber, which is the House of Representatives. I would just like to put that on record, Mr. President. Thank you. And we support the resolution. We have our vote.
Daghang salamat, Mr. President, and to all of you, thank you very much.
Senator Pangilinan, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator Pangilinan, is that?
Yes, just a manifestation, Mr. President. Mr. President, last Tuesday, members of the Liberal Party in the Senate issued a statement opposing the showing of the video as being illegal and so contrary to law, as well as contrary to the basic principles of parliamentary courtesy, among others. We're very happy, Mr. President, that it is now a bipartisan or multi-partisan commitment, Mr. President, and therefore we just wanted to place that on record that we appreciate our colleagues in the Senate standing by what we believe to be necessary, not to protect one of our own, but to uphold, really, one, parliamentary courtesy as a hallowed tradition in Congress, and two, of course, our concern about women and respect for women in general. So, for the record, Mr. President, we just wanted that manifested.
Maraming salamat. Legions of women advocates. I saw the importance of the women's voice in pushing policy. Because love her or hate her, one thing is certain. Miriam Defensor Santiago was a woman who made sure her voice was heard. She paved the way for women like me who believed that there was a glass ceiling that needed to be broken, an old boys club that needed to be penetrated, because this club sought to make decisions about our bodies, our health, our lives, and our futures without our consent. In this club, women are either outsiders who must request to get in, objects of spectacle whose existence and agency are defined according to the men in their lives, or recipients of tokenist favors. Buhay na buhay pa din, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, ang Old Boys Club sa gobyerno. This Old Boys Club phenomenon is alive and kicking. At its most benign, it can manifest itself in statements like, "Of course I will yield to the beautiful senator." Then it can progress to catcalling and rape jokes. Sa bagay, Mr. President, hindi lang ito sa Pilipinas. In America, their male presidential candidate just called a woman Miss Piggy. At its worst and ugliest, this Old Boys Club in the Philippines seeks to shame a woman senator into silence by threatening the release of a video purported to capture her in a sexual act. Now, the Justice Secretary says, quote, "We are not going to present anything about the sex video. We are not in possession of any video," close quote. Mr. President, we have yet to hear from the House of Representatives if they indeed will cease and desist from this threatened assault on a fellow legislator. The victory will be of the netizens, women writers, women representatives, and women senators who said enough. Whether you think the video is fake or not is of no moment. What you think of the drug-related allegations leveled against her is of no moment. Isang usapin lang po ang inilalatag ko sa inyong harapan ngayon, Mr. President. Will we allow the House of Representatives to show the sex video allegedly showing Senator Laila de Lima? In the first place, the release of the video would be illegal. It would be in violation of Republic Act 9995 or the Anti-Photo or Video Voyeurism Act of 2009, which requires the consent of the person or persons in the video before its release or distribution. The House Speakership and its Committee on Justice would be party to the commission of a crime under RA 9995. It would be, for all intents and purposes, a sex crime. Do we allow our colleagues in the House to be party to a sex crime? Do we allow a fellow senator to be the victim of a sex crime. But, Mr. President, the legality or illegality of it is not the core issue that I want to get to. It is the systemic and structural machismo that pervades our political culture. The double standards that are so ingrained in our life that they become invisible tools of oppression. Sa pag-iit ng opinyon, pag lalaki, assertive and decisive. Sinasabi ng lipunan, take a bow. Pag babae, hysterical and shrill. Sinasabi ng lipunan, take a break. Sa pag-abante ng career, pag lalaki, go-getter. Pag babae, bad mother. Kaya naman, pag ang lalaki may sex Mr. President, I rise on a point of personal and collective privilege. I rise as Senate Chair of the Committee on Women, as a senator, but most importantly as a woman. Last Thursday, during the committee hearing for the budget of the Commission on Human Rights, I was jolted by news of the passing of Miriam Defensor Santiago. Senator Miriam was many things to many people. To those with whom she crossed swords, they would likely remember her sharp, unrelenting tongue. To her family and close friends, she was a loving wife and mother. To the millennials of this country, her biting wit and pickup lines are the stuff legends are made of. To her supporters from various generations, she was, and I quote, the best president we never had, close quote. To me, Mr. President, I choose to remember her as an ally and fellow traveler in our long struggle for reproductive health. In her, I saw the tenacity required to shepherd important and historic legislation to fruition. And with her, as well as the video, macho, matinik, pagbabae, malaswa, malandi. Mr. President, we could still be about to cross the Rubicon if we stand by in silence while our colleagues in the House perpetrate this indignity against a fellow senator. We would have chosen vulgarity over civility, misogyny over basic respect and decency. We would be telling our daughters that they can be shamed for their sexuality in ways that their brothers or future husbands or partners will never be. We would be telling our little girls that their sexual choices are fair game and that their bodies can be policed. Sinong susunod? Sinong susunod na gagawa ng peking sex video? Sinong susunod na hihiyain sa madla? Ako, si Senator Nancy, si Senator Grace, si Senator Cynthia, o si Senator Loren? O ang babaeng iniwan ang nambubugbog na partner at bilang ganti ay in-upload ang sex video nila? Kasi pwede na. Sabi ng Kongreso, pwede. Mr. President, Senator Laila has her political battles, and many of you might disagree with her positions. So be it. But on the singular issue of the sex